chosen soul. You broke the endless cycle. You broke the pattern that repeated for lifetimes, for generations, and for as long as your soul could remember. The same lessons, the same relationships, the same struggles, and the same suffering were playing out again and again in different forms, with different people, and in different circumstances, but with the same essential pattern. You recognized it finally. You understood it completely. You chose differently, consciously, and broke the cycle that held your soul captive for so long. This breaking, this ending, and this liberation from a repetitive pattern changed everything for you, for your lineage, and for your future incarnations. You broke what seemed unbreakable. You ended what seemed endless. You freed yourself from a cycle that had you trapped. You broke the cycle of seeking validation from those incapable of giving it. You kept returning to people who couldn't see you, couldn't value you, and couldn't appreciate you. You kept hoping this time would be different, that this time they'd recognize your worth, and that this time they'd give the approval, the acceptance, and the validation you craved from them. But they never could, never would, and never will, because they don't have what you seek, can't give what you need, and won't provide what you deserve. You finally understood you don't need their validation. You validated yourself, approved of yourself, and accepted yourself completely. This self-validation broke the cycle of seeking worth from sources that can't provide it. You found worth within, where it always existed. You broke the cycle of choosing unavailable people and the pattern of attraction to those who can't commit, who won't show up, and who don't choose you back. You repeated this pattern in relationship after relationship, with different faces, different names, and different circumstances, but with the same unavailability, the same emotional distance, and the same inability. It was the same inability to meet you where you are. You recognized the pattern. You understood you were recreating childhood dynamics and trying to heal old wounds through new people who couldn't heal them. You chose differently. You chose someone available, someone present, and someone who chooses you fully. This conscious choice broke the cycle that kept you in relationships that couldn't fulfill you. You broke the cycle of sacrificing yourself for others and the pattern of putting everyone else first, of neglecting your needs, and of abandoning your dreams to support theirs. You learned this early, that your worth came from service, from sacrifice, and from self-abandonment for others. You repeated this pattern with partners, with friends, with family, and with employers until you had nothing left for yourself. You recognized martyrdom isn't love, self-sacrifice isn't service, and self-abandonment isn't virtue. You learned to give from overflow, to serve from fullness, and to love from wholeness. This balanced giving broke the cycle of depletion through constant self-sacrifice. You filled your own cup first. You broke the cycle of staying in situations past their expiration date. It was the pattern of holding on long after you should let go, of trying to make dead things live, and of forcing what's ending to continue because you fear change, fear loss, and fear the unknown that comes after an ending. You stayed in jobs that drained you, in relationships that depleted you, and in friendships that diminished you far longer than you should have, hoping things would change, would improve, and would return to what they were at the beginning. You finally understood everything has a season. Endings are natural and necessary. There is nothing wrong with you for outgrowing situations that no longer serve you. This acceptance of endings broke the cycle of staying too long in places you've outgrown. You broke the cycle of repeating your parents' patterns, the unconscious behaviors, and the limiting beliefs. You broke the dysfunctional dynamics that you inherited from your family, from your lineage, and from the generations before you. You swore you'd never be like them, but found yourself reacting the same, choosing the same, and creating the same patterns in your own life that you criticized in theirs. You became conscious of what you inherited. You healed what they couldn't. You chose differently than they did. This conscious awareness, this deliberate choice, and this healing work broke generational patterns that passed through bloodlines for centuries. You ended what they couldn't end for themselves. You healed what they passed to you. You freed your children from the patterns you broke. You broke the cycle of numbing your pain through addiction. It was the pattern of escaping reality through substances, through behaviors, and through anything that made you feel less, hurt less, and care less about pain you couldn't face, emotions you couldn't process, and a reality you couldn't handle. You used food, alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, work, television, social media, and anything to avoid feeling what needed feeling, to avoid healing what needed healing, and to avoid facing what needed facing. You finally stopped running, stopped numbing, and stopped escaping. You felt everything. You processed the pain. You healed the wounds. You faced reality fully, completely, and consciously. This courageous feeling broke the cycle of addiction to anything that helped you avoid your own experience. You broke the cycle of financial struggle, the pattern of never having enough, of constant scarcity, and of perpetual lack that seemed to follow you despite your efforts, despite your work, and despite your attempts to change it. You inherited poverty consciousness from your family, from your culture, and from programming that taught money is scarce, hard to get, and evil to want. You transformed your relationship with money. You healed your scarcity beliefs. You released your poverty programming and developed an abundance consciousness. You understood money is energy, and energy flows where consciousness focuses. This mindset shift, this consciousness change, and this belief transformation broke the cycle of financial struggle that plagued generations before you. You broke the cycle of attracting narcissists, the pattern of magnetizing people who use you, who manipulate you, and who see you as supply rather than a soul. You kept attracting the same personality type in different bodies, partners who seemed perfect at first, then revealed their true nature as self-centered, emotionally unavailable, exploitative people who took everything you gave while giving nothing real back. You healed your wounds that made you attractive to narcissists. You developed boundaries they couldn't cross. You recognized red flags you previously ignored. You chose people capable of genuine connection, of authentic love, and of a reciprocal relationship. This healing, this awareness, and this different choosing broke the cycle of narcissistic relationships. You broke the cycle of perfectionism, the pattern of never being good enough, of constantly striving without ever arriving, and of measuring yourself against impossible standards that kept you running on a treadmill that went nowhere. You learned this early, that love was conditional on performance, that acceptance required perfection, and that worth depended on achievement. You drove yourself relentlessly toward goals that kept moving further away the closer you got. You finally understood perfection is impossible. Good enough is actually good enough. Your worth isn't based on performance. This acceptance of imperfection, this grace for yourself, and this release of impossible standards broke the cycle of perfectionism that made life an exhausting pursuit of an unattainable ideal. You broke the cycle of people-pleasing, the pattern of saying yes when you mean no. You broke the pattern of accommodating everyone but yourself and of contorting yourself into shapes that please others while abandoning who you actually are. You learned early that keeping the peace meant keeping quiet, that being loved meant being agreeable, and that belonging required conforming to others' expectations. You sacrificed yourself on the altar of others' comfort until you disappeared completely under the weight of who everyone needed you to be. You found your voice, your no, your boundaries, and your authentic self that didn't bend to please others. This authenticity, this self-honoring, and this boundary setting broke the cycle of people-pleasing that erased you. You broke the cycle of chronic illness, the pattern of perpetual sickness, of constant symptoms, and of endless medical appointments that never quite solved anything. You inherited illness patterns from your family. You internalized stress into your body. You manifested unprocessed emotions as physical symptoms. You carried trauma in your cells. You finally understood the body speaks what the mind suppresses. Symptoms are messages. Illness is communication from parts of you trying to be heard. You listened to your body. You processed emotions. You healed trauma. You addressed root causes rather than just managing symptoms. This holistic healing, this mind-body integration, and this trauma resolution broke the cycle of chronic illness that modern medicine only manages. You broke the cycle of self-sabotage, the pattern of getting close to success and then destroying it, of creating opportunities and then running from them, and of building something good and then burning it down. You had an unconscious belief you didn't deserve success, didn't deserve happiness, and didn't deserve good things. That came from childhood wounds that convinced you of your unworthiness. You sabotaged relationships, jobs, opportunities, health, finances, and anything good that came into your life. You healed your unworthiness wounds. You developed a deserving consciousness. You learned to receive good things without destroying them. This worthiness, this receptivity, and this allowing of good broke the cycle of self-sabotage that kept destroying everything you built. You broke the cycle of codependency, the pattern of losing yourself in relationships, and of making someone else your source of happiness, of identity, and of worth. You didn't know where you ended and they began. You took responsibility for their feelings, their choices, and their life while neglecting your own. You became enmeshed, entangled, and confused about whose life you were living. You developed healthy independence. You created strong boundaries. You took responsibility for yourself. You let them take responsibility for themselves. You loved without losing yourself. You connected without enmeshing. You related without codepending. This healthy interdependence, this boundaried love, and this sovereign connection broke the cycle. It broke the cycle of codependency that erased individuals and relationships. You broke the cycle of comparison and competition, the pattern of measuring yourself against others, of feeling less than or better than based on external comparisons, and of seeing life as a race you must win at others' expense. You were taught worth is relative, success is comparative, and value is competitive. You constantly measured, competed, and compared until you lost sight of your own path, your own journey, and your own progress. You understood everyone's path is unique. Comparison is pointless. Your only competition is who you were yesterday. This focus on personal growth, this celebration of others' success, and this recognition of a unique journey broke the cycle of comparison that stole joy from every achievement. You broke the cycle of rushing through life, the pattern of always moving to the next thing, never fully present for the current moment, always planning the future and replaying the past. You were missing entirely the now. That's all that actually exists. You rushed through meals, through conversations, through experiences, and through life itself, always thinking about what's next, what needs to be done, and where you should be other than here, other than now. You learned to be present, to slow down, and to fully inhabit each moment, each experience, and each breath. You discovered life happens in the present moment. Everything else is memory or imagination. This presence, this slowing down, and this full inhabitation of the now broke the cycle of rushing through life without actually living it. Chosen soul, you broke the endless cycle. You broke every pattern that repeated, every lesson that returned, and every dynamic that replayed throughout your life, throughout your lineage, and throughout your soul's journey across lifetimes. You recognized what was repeating. You understood why it repeated. You chose differently than you ever had before. This conscious choice, this deliberate breaking, and this intentional ending of patterns changed everything for you, for your ancestors who passed patterns to you, for your descendants who won't inherit what you broke, and for your soul that's finally free to move beyond lessons you mastered, beyond patterns you ended, and beyond cycles you broke. You did what generations before you couldn't do. You ended what seemed endless. You broke what seemed unbreakable. You freed yourself and everyone connected to you from cycles that held you all captive. This breaking is liberation. It is evolution. It is transformation of the highest order. You broke the endless cycle. Everything changes now. You broke the cycle of toxic friendships, the pattern of attracting people who drain your energy, who take without giving, who criticize without supporting, and who compete rather than celebrate. You kept choosing friends who made you feel worse about yourself, who dimmed your light, and who benefited from your struggles. You chose friends who disappeared when you needed them, but appeared when they needed you. You finally saw the pattern. You set boundaries. You chose quality over quantity. You surrounded yourself with people who uplift, who celebrate, who reciprocate, and who show up. This conscious friend selection, this boundary setting, and this reciprocity requirement broke the cycle of friendships that depleted rather than fulfilled you. You broke the cycle of carrying everyone's problems, the pattern of being an emotional dumping ground, of absorbing others' stress, of taking on their anxiety as your own, and of feeling responsible for fixing everyone's issues. You were the one everyone came to with problems, the one who listened for hours, the one who gave advice, and the one who tried to fix everything for everyone while nobody asked how you were doing, what you needed, or how they could help you. You learned you're not responsible for other people's emotions, for their problems, or for their healing. You developed healthy boundaries. You stopped absorbing energy that wasn't yours. You helped without taking on. This energetic sovereignty, this emotional boundary, and this responsibility clarity broke the cycle of carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders alone. You broke the cycle of tolerating disrespect, The pattern of accepting treatment you'd never accept for loved ones, of making excuses for people's bad behavior, of minimizing your own hurt, and of convincing yourself it's not that bad. You allowed people to dismiss you, to interrupt you, to ignore you, to belittle you, to cross boundaries, and to treat you as less than because you were taught being nice meant accepting everything, being kind meant tolerating anything, and being good meant never making waves. You found your voice, you demanded respect, you walked away from disrespect. You no longer accept treatment that doesn't honor your worth. This self-respect, this standard setting, and this boundary enforcing broke the cycle. It broke the cycle of tolerating treatment you never deserved. You broke the cycle of living for others' expectations, the pattern of choosing the career your parents wanted, of pursuing goals society approved, and of living a life that looked good to others while feeling empty to you. You made decisions based on what others would think, what others would say, and what others would approve. You pursued their version of success, their definition of happiness, and their idea of a good life while ignoring your own desires, your own dreams, and your own calling. You finally listened to yourself. You chose your path. You pursued your dreams. You lived your truth regardless of others' opinions. This authenticity, this self-directed living, and this opinion independence broke the cycle of living a life designed by others for you. You broke the cycle of chronic stress, the pattern of constant overwhelm, of perpetual anxiety, of never feeling caught up, and of living in emergency mode. You normalized stress as a way of life. You wore busyness as a badge of honor. You bragged about how little you slept, how much you had to do, and how stressed you were. You finally understood chronic stress is not normal, is not healthy, and is not sustainable. You simplified your life. You eliminated unnecessary obligations. You created space for rest, for peace, and for ease. This stress reduction, this life simplification, and this pace slowing broke the cycle of chronic stress that was killing you slowly. You broke the cycle of suppressing anger, the pattern of swallowing rage, of pretending you're not angry, and of turning anger inward into depression, into anxiety, and into physical symptoms. You were taught anger is bad, especially for you. You learned to smile when hurt, to be nice when violated, and to keep the peace when you wanted to scream. You stuffed anger down, pushed it away, and denied it existed until it manifested as illness, as depression, and as chronic pain. You learned anger is information, is energy, and is a valid response to boundary violations. You expressed anger healthily. You used it as fuel for change. You honored it as a teacher. This anger acceptance, this healthy expression, and this energy utilization broke the cycle of suppressed rage destroying you from the inside. You broke the cycle of waiting to be rescued, the pattern of hoping someone would save you, would fix your problems, would make everything better, and would give you permission to live your life. You waited for a prince, for a boss, for a parent, for a friend, or for anyone to come rescue you from a life you didn't choose, from situations you felt stuck in, and from problems you couldn't solve alone. You finally understood nobody's coming to save you. You must save yourself. You are your own hero, your own rescue, and your own salvation. This self-rescue, this self-empowerment, and this taking responsibility for your own life broke the cycle. It broke the cycle of waiting for an external rescue that was never coming. You broke the cycle of negative self-talk, the pattern of internal criticism, and of mental abuse you inflicted on yourself daily, of speaking to yourself in ways you'd never speak to others. You had a running commentary of criticism, of judgment, of harsh evaluation, and of self-condemnation that played constantly in your mind. You called yourself names. You focused on flaws. You magnified mistakes. You minimized achievements. You treated yourself as an enemy rather than a friend. You changed your inner dialogue. You spoke kindly to yourself. You offered grace for mistakes. You celebrated progress. You became your own best friend. This self-compassion, this kind self-talk, and this internal friendship broke the cycle of self-abuse through negative thinking. You broke the cycle of ignoring intuition, the pattern of overriding gut feelings, of dismissing inner knowing, of trusting logic over instinct, and of following advice that contradicted your inner guidance. You felt something was wrong but talked yourself out of it. You knew which choice to make but second-guessed yourself. You sensed red flags but ignored them. You had inner wisdom screaming the truth, but you listened to everything except that. You learned intuition is real intelligence, inner knowing is trustworthy, and gut feelings are accurate information. You started honoring your intuition, following your knowing, and trusting your feelings. This intuition trust, this inner knowing honoring, and this gut feeling following broke the cycle of ignoring your most reliable guidance system. You broke the cycle of overgiving and under-receiving, the pattern of giving everything you have while struggling to receive anything back, and of pouring from an empty cup while refusing to let anyone fill yours. You gave time, energy, money, love, support, and help to everyone who asked and to many who didn't ask, while feeling guilty for needing anything yourself, while refusing help when offered, and while minimizing your own needs. You learned healthy relationships are reciprocal. Giving and receiving must balance. You can't pour from an empty cup. You started receiving graciously, asking for help, accepting support, and balancing giving with receiving. This reciprocity, this balanced exchange, and this gracious receiving broke the cycle of depletion through overgiving. You broke the cycle of fear-based decision-making, the pattern of choosing from fear, from scarcity, and from worst-case scenarios rather than from possibility, from abundance, and from best outcomes. Every decision was filtered through fear. What if it fails? What if they leave? What if I lose everything? What if it's a mistake? You chose safe over authentic, secure over aligned, and comfortable over fulfilling because fear dictated every choice. You started choosing from love, from faith, from possibility, and from alignment with truth. You asked what love would do, what the soul wants, and what serves the highest good. This love-based choosing, this faith-driven deciding, and this soul-aligned selecting broke the cycle. It broke the cycle of fear shrinking your life into the smallest possible version. You broke the cycle of revenge and resentment, the pattern of holding grudges, of planning revenge, of nursing wounds, and of feeding anger toward those who hurt you. You kept a score of wrongs. You replayed injustices. You fantasized about payback. You held on to hurt like a weapon to use later. You stayed bitter, stayed angry, and stayed resentful, thinking it hurt them when it only poisoned you. You chose forgiveness. You released resentment. You let go of the need for revenge. You understood forgiveness isn't for them. It's for you. It's freedom from a prison of perpetual anger. This forgiveness, this release, and this letting go broke the cycle of resentment poisoning your present with past hurts. Chosen soul, you broke the endless cycle. You broke pattern after pattern, lesson after lesson, and dynamic after dynamic that held you captive, that kept you stuck, and that maintained suffering across lifetimes. You recognized the repetition. You understood the purpose. You chose differently. You healed wounds. You set boundaries. You changed behaviors. You transformed beliefs. You released patterns one by one, cycle by cycle, and pattern by pattern until you stood free, finally free, completely free from cycles that defined your past, from patterns that limited your present, and from programming that would have controlled your future. You broke what generations couldn't break. You ended what lifetimes couldn't end. You freed what ages couldn't free. This cycle breaking, this pattern ending, and this liberation achieving is your greatest accomplishment, your deepest healing, and your most significant transformation. Because it doesn't just free you, it frees everyone in your lineage, past ancestors who passed patterns to you, future descendants who won't inherit what you broke, and present family who benefit from your healing. You broke the endless cycle. You ended the perpetual pattern. You freed ancient programming. Now you're free to create new patterns, new cycles, and new ways of being that serve rather than harm, that liberate rather than imprison, and that evolve rather than repeat. You broke the endless cycle. Nothing will ever be the same. Everything is possible now in the freedom you created, in the space you cleared, and in the possibility you opened by breaking what seemed unbreakable, by ending what seemed endless, and by freeing what seemed imprisoned forever. You broke the endless cycle. Everything changes now. You broke the cycle of settling for less than you deserve, the pattern of accepting crumbs when you deserved a feast, of tolerating mediocre when you deserved extraordinary, and of making do with almost when you deserved exactly. You convinced yourself to be grateful for less, to not ask for too much, and to accept whatever came your way. You lowered your standards, reduced your expectations, and minimized your needs. You told yourself this is as good as it gets, this is all you can expect, and this is what you should accept. You finally recognized your worth. You raised your standards. You refused to settle. You demanded what you deserved. You walked away from less than. You waited for exactly right. This worth recognition, this standard raising, and this settling refusal broke the cycle of accepting less than you absolutely deserved. You broke the cycle of outsourcing your power, the pattern of giving authority to experts, to gurus, to leaders, and to anyone but yourself. You believed they knew better, they understood more, and they had answers you didn't. You followed their advice even when it contradicted your knowing. You trusted their guidance over your intuition. You believed their truth more than your own. You gave your power away to doctors, to therapists, to coaches, to teachers, to spiritual leaders, and to anyone who seemed more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more credible than you. You reclaimed your authority. You trusted your knowing. You honored your truth. You became your own guru, your own healer, and your own teacher. This power reclamation, this authority restoration, and this self-trust development broke the cycle of outsourcing power that was always yours. You broke the cycle of chronic exhaustion, the pattern of running on empty, of pushing through fatigue, and of ignoring your body's need for rest. You wore exhaustion as a badge of honor. You bragged about functioning on little sleep. You pushed harder when your body said stop. You ignored signals to slow down, to rest, and to restore. You believed rest was laziness, sleep was weakness, and slowing down was failure. You ran yourself into the ground repeatedly until your body forced rest through illness, through injury, and through complete breakdown. You learned rest is productive, sleep is essential, and slowing down is wisdom. You honored your body's needs. You prioritized restoration. You made rest sacred. This rest honoring, this body respecting, and this energy preserving broke the cycle of exhaustion that was destroying your health. You broke the cycle of emotional unavailability, the pattern of keeping people at a distance, of building walls instead of bridges, and of protecting yourself through disconnection. You learned early that vulnerability meant danger, that opening meant hurt, and that trusting meant betrayal. You built a fortress around your heart. You kept everyone outside the walls. You connected superficially while remaining deeply alone. You wanted intimacy but feared it simultaneously. You pushed away what you most desired. You sabotaged the closeness you desperately needed. You finally understood walls that keep pain out also keep love out. Protection that prevents hurt also prevents connection. And safety through distance creates loneliness through isolation. You learn to be vulnerable, to open gradually, to trust carefully, and to connect authentically. This vulnerability, this gradual opening, and this careful trusting broke the cycle. It broke the cycle of emotional unavailability that kept you safe but lonely. You broke the cycle of living in survival mode, the pattern of constant vigilance, of perpetual alertness, and of never feeling safe enough to relax. Your nervous system stayed in fight or flight. Your body remained in emergency mode. Your mind scanned constantly for threats, real or imagined, present or past, actual or potential. You couldn't rest because you never felt safe, couldn't relax because danger might strike, and couldn't let your guard down because staying alert kept you alive once, in childhood, in trauma, and in circumstances that actually were dangerous. But those circumstances ended while your nervous system stayed activated. You learned to regulate your nervous system, to signal safety to your body, to come down from constant alert, and to rest in present safety. This nervous system regulation, this safety signaling, and this present moment grounding broke the cycle of living in survival mode when you're actually safe. You broke the cycle of denying your desires, the pattern of suppressing wants, of minimizing needs, and of pretending you don't want what you actually want. You learned early that wanting was selfish, desiring was greedy, and needing was weakness. You trained yourself to want nothing, need nothing, and desire nothing, to be satisfied with whatever came, to not burden others with your wants, and to not risk rejection by expressing needs. You denied desires so long you forgot what you actually wanted. You suppressed needs so deeply you couldn't feel them anymore. You pretended preferences didn't matter until you lost connection with your own desires entirely. You reconnected with wanting. You honored your desires. You expressed your needs. You understood wanting is human, desiring is healthy, and needing is natural. This desire honoring, this need expressing, And this wanting embracing broke the cycle of self-denial that erased your authentic preferences. You broke the cycle of performance-based worth. You broke the pattern of believing you're only valuable when achieving, only worthy when producing, and only lovable when succeeding. Your worth depended on output. Your value was measured by accomplishments, and your lovability was determined by performance. You pushed yourself relentlessly to prove your worth through achievement, to earn love through success, and to deserve existence through productivity. You couldn't rest because resting meant you were worthless, couldn't slow down because slowing meant failure, and couldn't just be because being wasn't enough. You had to constantly do, achieve, produce, and perform to justify your existence. You learned your worth is inherent, your value is intrinsic, and your lovability is unconditional. You are worthy because you exist, valuable because you're you, and lovable because you're human. This inherent worth recognition, this intrinsic value understanding, and this unconditional lovability knowing broke the cycle of performance-based worth that made rest impossible. You broke the cycle of catastrophic thinking, the pattern of always expecting the worst, of planning for disaster, and of living in constant fear of terrible outcomes. Your mind automatically went to the worst-case scenario. Every headache was a tumor, every late text was an accident, and every small problem was a complete catastrophe waiting to happen. You lived in perpetual anxiety about future disasters, about terrible outcomes, and about the worst possibilities that rarely actually occurred. You catastrophized constantly, you awfulized everything, and you terrified yourself with imagination of horrors that existed only in your mind. You learned to question catastrophic thoughts, to challenge worst-case assumptions, to consider more likely outcomes, and to stay present with what actually is rather than what might be. This thought challenging, this reality checking, and this present staying broke the cycle of catastrophic thinking that created constant anxiety about disasters that never came. You broke the cycle of betraying yourself for others, the pattern of abandoning your truth for their comfort, of silencing your voice for their peace, and of compromising your values for their approval. You said yes when you meant no. You smiled when you were hurt. You agreed when you disagreed. You conformed when you wanted to rebel. You made yourself smaller, quieter, and less to accommodate their needs, their preferences, and their comfort at the cost of your own integrity, your own authenticity, and your own truth. You finally stopped betraying yourself. You honored your truth. You spoke your no. You stood in your values. You chose authenticity over approval. This self-honoring, this truth-speaking, and this integrity choosing broke the cycle of self-betrayal that cost you yourself. Chosen soul, you broke the endless cycle. You broke every single pattern, every recurring dynamic, and every repeating lesson that played out across your lifetime, across your lineage, and across your soul's journey through multiple incarnations. You saw what was happening. You understood why it happened. You did the hard work of healing, of changing, of choosing differently, and of becoming someone who no longer participates in old patterns, who no longer repeats old mistakes, and who no longer perpetuates old cycles. This is mastery. This is evolution. This is transformation at the deepest level. You freed yourself. You freed your lineage. You freed your future from patterns that seemed permanent, from cycles that seemed eternal, and from programming that seemed unbreakable. But you broke them, you ended them, and you transcended them through consciousness, through choice, and through the courage to do what was never done before in your family, in your lineage, and in your soul's history. You are the pattern breaker, the cycle ender, and the generational healer who did what no one before you could do, what no one after you will need to do. Because you did it, you broke the endless cycle. You ended the perpetual pattern. You freed yourself and everyone connected to you from programming that held you captive for generations, for lifetimes, and for ages beyond memory. You broke the endless cycle. Now you're free, completely free, finally free to create new patterns that serve, new cycles that elevate, and new ways of being that liberate rather than imprison, that expand rather than contract, and that evolve rather than repeat. You broke the endless cycle. Everything is possible now in the freedom you created, in the space you cleared, and in the new beginning you opened by ending what seemed endless, by breaking what seemed unbreakable, and by freeing what seemed forever imprisoned. You broke the endless cycle. You are free. Your children are free. Your lineage is free forever because of what you did, what you healed, and what you broke. The endless cycle ends with you. A new cycle begins with you, the cycle of freedom, of consciousness, of choice, of evolution, and of liberation that will bless generations after you just as old cycles cursed generations before you. You broke the endless cycle. Everything changes now. Everything changes now.